And thanks everybody for taking the time to go on a little mini retreat. Maybe please just let everything around you be as it is and just pause and let yourself arrive. I love when Thich Nhat Hanh used to say, I have arrived. I am home. Today we have a very rich theme. In Pali, it's called Dukkha. It's the most crucial element in the Buddhist teachings. It's mostly translated as suffering or stress, ill-being. It's a characteristic of life. That's how the Buddha called it. A fact of life. And the summer is about 3 facts of life. We've been exploring impermanence. Today, dukkha. Next week, we'll also look more deeply with Matthew Brensilver teaching at not self. Let's start with the guided practice. And all the instructions are simple suggestions. The first and most necessary step of all practice is to remember to be aware. It's taking a moment to know that you are mindful. And starting with feeling the aliveness in your body. Is it helpful to assume a still position or do some stretching first? Throughout our whole mini retreat, see if you can stay closely connected to the body. Perhaps closing your eyes or keep them open softly. Feeling the aliveness in this body. And know you're feeling it. See if you've already assumed your position. Take your time doing so. You have arrived. You are home. Notice how the body is breathing. Where do you feel the breath moving the most? Notice how the breath is always changing. Attuning to the changing breathing body. This is this fact of change. And sometimes things feel unpleasant, painful, irritating. It's the fact of dukkha. There's dukkha present right now in the body. Maybe a stiffness, a throbbing. Even gently whispering, if so, dukkha. Another fact of life. Taking a moment to know your mind state. What's the overall mood? It's as if the sky knows the clouds or the weather. Is the mind very alive? Is it still? Can you notice change appearing in the mind? The coming and going of an idea, a thought, an emotion. Noticing this first fact of life, change. Is dukkha present in the mind? Is there a wanting, a resisting, confusion? Or is it absent? This is the invitation. You notice resistance, pain, to recognize it as dukkha. That's it. Nothing to manage, Notice its changing nature. And to pause, to come back to awareness. Perhaps anchor to the breath. As we're moving into minutes of stillness. Noticing that moment of waking up from being lost in thinking. When you're home again. Gently checking if resistance and wanting, if dukkha, if there's anything stressful, if it's present right now. Meeting your experiences with kind awareness is like this right now. You are never too late for the present moment. And every time you pause, you can notice that awareness is already here, sensitive to all these experiences.
Thank you, Bart. Friends, I just wanted to take a moment now um, to just share a couple of quick updates just to make sure that everyone is aware of our upcoming schedule. So we have, in addition to this one, 2 more Sundays of practice before we transition into our summer pause. So just a reminder, we will be meeting next Sunday, and the Sunday after. Then we return right after Labor Day. And on the subject of generosity and this community being so adept at pouring into our Sangha, we have three retreats coming up in the fall, which we're very, very excited about. So we have one in September, one in November, and then one in December. And in just a moment, in addition to sharing ways that you can contribute financially to the CMC, if you are able to offer a couple of dollars or more to support our work, we really do need some volunteers with us for each of these events. So I will also be sharing a sign up genius. And ideally, we would have two or maybe three volunteers to help us, and each will serve a slightly different role. But that would be incredibly helpful. And it's also part of how we want to continue to weave this real beautiful tapestry of community. So actually being together and sharing in the joyful work of making CMC what it is. So I'll share that information in just a moment. And Bart, you had alluded to Matthew Brensilver. So he's teaching next Sunday, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Wonderful. So we will have one more guest teacher.
right.
Bart will be, closing the show for us before our pause. But I will share that information with you now. It would be wonderful to have those of you who can practice with us in New York City join us for these retreats. And also a real invitation and encouragement from us to please bring a friend with you to the retreat. It's a really special way for us to be together, and also a really wonderful way for new members of the community to learn what it feels like to be a part of this really special place, Community Meditation Center. So I will share that information with you in just a moment. And thank you all for listening.
Mm. Thank you, Jessica. It's bringing me a sense of joy. Also thinking about that almost a lot of Sundays from now on, once a month, we'll be doing this hybrid so that you could still be online if you like. But if you are a New Yorker, you can come down to like 30th Street and 7th Avenue and practice in the beautiful space of New York Insight with us. And I just want to thank you, Jessica, for shepherding us and holding our community in such a beautiful way. And the bell sounds good on your new computer. And so I want to start by saying this word a lot, dukkha, dukkha. And most of you probably have heard it. It's kind of almost just as familiar for some of us as the word Dāna, generosity, all coming from that Pali language. But you could really say that the whole of the Buddhist teachings is built around understanding dukkha, but also the ending of the experience of dukkha. Before unpacking it more, let me just do a little thing in the beginning by saying, I don't fully understand it. I don't fully understand the depth of dukkha yet. And Tanisaru Bhikkhu, a monk who has translated a lot of text from Pali into English, I read something where he said, if you ever think that you understand dukkha, look again. Don't get too comfortable with thinking that you fully understand dukkha. And its translations are quite varied. Most people translate it as suffering or stress, but it's actually more deeper than just that. It's also about that all things inherently have an element of dukkha in them, meaning they're never fully satisfying because they change. And because we're not fully in control of the things, because they're conditioned by so many causes. And that's actually where our theme of this month is about. It's sometimes referred to as the three characteristics, or I like to call them the three facts or insights of life. In short, you could say all things are impermanent, imperfect, the dukkha, and impersonal. Nothing in nature exists alone. Nothing is separate or personal. And these are the insights that the Buddha awakened to, that all things are impermanent, never completely fully satisfying, imperfect, and that they're interconnected, impersonal. And last week, Bhante Viveka started our very first element. He talked and taught on impermanence, the first fact. And he mentioned the very first teaching the Buddha once gave. And I went back to it because I was kind of inspired by his teachings. If you've missed it, I highly recommend going to our website and listen to it. But what I found interesting is that when the Buddha had awakened to these three insights, these three facts of life, he was actually doubting whether he should teach it. He was in doubt whether people would understand it. And the texts say that there was this celestial being that convinced him that there might be some people with little dust in their eyes. And so he realized that perhaps he could do his first teaching to his 5 friends whom he had done these ascetic practices with. And I also found out what kind of ascetic practices they did. Like they fasted to the extent where, imagine you put your hand on your belly and then you can feel your spine. And they would also do breath holding contests, which are actually in New York City public pools prohibited, to the effect that they had extreme headaches. Really intense stuff. And as the teaching goes, the Buddha left these people because this almost self-harm practice wasn't leading to insight into suffering, into dukkha. But so when he was fully awakened, he was met with some reservation, of course, because he had left them. But he had a very serene and almost, I guess, charismatic vibe around him. And they were listening and willing to listen to what's now famously called the turning of the wheel of the Dharma, the very first teaching. If you ever want to read it, I highly recommend it. I've based my whole talk today on it. And what I found interesting is that for someone who's teaching for the very first time, he did something very skillful, and that is to meet his audience where they are. So he starts the teaching by saying, I have discovered the middle way between indulging myself in sense pleasures and harming myself or tormenting myself through practices. I found something right in the middle. He said that the nutriments to dukkha are these extremes of lust and aversion. And the Buddha used the imagery a lot in his teaching, especially around food and nutriment. So you could say, I kind of went on a little bit with this, please forgive me, that the path to freedom is about knowing what nutriments we take to make us suffer and to know how to feed ourselves with good food that brings happiness. I continue with the food analogy. The first meal we should probably have is to know that well-being is possible, that happiness is possible, and to know the recipe for freedom. And in Buddhism, the recipe for freedom is called right view. And I love how Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese teacher, used to talk about it. He said that right view is to know that because of the existence of what he calls ill-being, there must also be well-being in life. He said, there's no left without right. There's no light without darkness. Well-being is possible because of ill-being. So freedom is possible because of dukkha. And both ill-being and well-being depend on conditions. And then he told his four friends about these four truths that he discovered, the Four Noble Truths. And I like how Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it. He says the first noble truth is about ill-being. The second noble truth is about the path to ill-being. The third noble truth is about well-being. And the fourth noble truth is about the path to well-being. And when I was reading the text, and again, knowing this was his first teaching, I paused for a moment and remembered my very first teaching. It was very different. First of all, I wasn't and am not a fully awakened. And I'd been a volunteer in a juvenile detention center for about 6 months. Just, putting the yoga mats and listening to the teachers. And all of a sudden, my friend Chati said, you could try it, Bart. Go for it. So I did. And then there was one kid next to me as I was guiding meditation. All of a sudden, he goes, Bart, we get it. You can stop giving us more instructions. And I felt the dukkha first of being a little embarrassed and a sense of I should do this right, kind of like the Buddha. But now I'm actually forever grateful for receiving that kind of honest feedback from the kids. But I'm just astonished by the clarity of that very first teaching. Because after sharing about these Four Noble Truths, about ill-being, dukkha, and the end of dukkha, well-being, he started to give a definition of dukkha. It's always good to hear this. Birth is dukkha. Aging is dukkha. Sickness is dukkha. Death is dukkha. Sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Being with things you don't want is dukkha. Being separated from things and beings you love is dukkha. And to not get what you want is dukkha. This is called the first noble truth. This is part of it. It's that understanding that sometimes things hurt. That's how Sharon Salzberg puts it. Sometimes things just hurt. And when they do, one thing that I often do is I label them as dukkha. This will be your homework if you don't mind. That next week, in your meditation or in life, when you feel that things are hurting, not going your way, to just whisper, dukkha. Dukkha is here. And just see what happens. Even when you're not really sure, like there's something off, just call it dukkha. Like last week when I was finished with the teaching with Bhante Viveka on Sunday, I received an email from someone in the community. And she shared that while Bhante was teaching, she received a phone call, but decided to not pick up the phone and just stay with the teaching. And later, when she called her friend back, she found out that her friend's husband had passed away. Dukkha. when you open the news, an app, or the actual paper, or on TV. Dukkha. Or even minor, weird things like I was swimming outside in a lake in the Netherlands this morning and I saw someone steal my towel. Dukkha. And then the Buddha, after he kind of gave that definition, he told his friends that he went through different phases in his own understanding of dukkha. And there was 3 phases, he said. In the first phase, he characterized as this, and I quote, dukkha as a noble truth is this. So what he did in the first phase is noticing dukkha, is naming it, acknowledging it when it's here. Maybe just check right now. Is dukkha present right now? Maybe mild physical discomfort. Maybe there's something happening in the mind. Dukkha. This first phase is kind of radical. And when I talk about it to people who don't meditate, they say it feels counterintuitive to become mindful of stress, ill-being. But it's actually very powerful when you realize, oh yeah, dukkha's here. It's as if you allow yourself for a moment to be unhappy, to let others be unhappy, but you know it's happening. So that's the first phase, this sense of acknowledging dukkha's here. Then he said, I had another phase. And I quote him again. He says, this dukkha as a noble truth can be diagnosed. So while he was just practicing with noticing how things sometimes are in our way, he started to realize that we can learn from being with dukkha. And throughout this whole talk, I had so many words coming from my teacher, Joseph Goldstein, in my mind. His favorite line is, don't let your dukkha or your suffering go to waste. It's actually a powerful development in your meditation practice when you start to realize, let me turn towards the difficult. Let me see if I can become intimate with it so that I can hold it in a way that I might not create even more suffering around it. This dukkha as a noble truth can be diagnosed. It's these moments when you see that what's in the way is actually the way right now. But then on that night of his awakening, the Buddha realized the third phase in his understanding of dukkha. This is what he said. He said, this dukkha, this suffering as a noble truth, has been diagnosed. He understood dukkha fully. He realized fully the unsatisfying and imperfect nature of all composed things, but also fully realized that craving for things to be otherwise is the cause for more dukkha. And so he told his friends that he discovered this middle way of mindfulness, of kind attention that leads to well-being, contentment, and peace. And that you can live with change and live with dukkha in peace. but it all starts with that word diagnosing. I hope I pronounce it right in English. Jessica nods. So let me ask you this. Are you willing to practice with dukkha? I mean it seriously. Are you? Maybe just pause for yourself. Like a few weeks ago, we were contemplating on why meditate. Are you willing to meditate with difficulty? When you're angry, when someone steals your towel, or when you're confused, full of cravings. And then to go, this is dukkha, that first phase. You just feel into a sense of an aspiration, perhaps. To me, it's like a New Year's resolution. I need to renew it from time to time. And as many of you know, I also go on retreats where you practice meditation for longer periods of time. Now, once I was doing a retreat for many weeks, and I had a moment where there's so much stiffness in my body and feeling very tired. And my mind felt very restless, not concentrated at all. And then on a retreat, you have meetings with a teacher. So I went to have a meeting with Joseph. And I joked, but I kind of meant it like, why can't I just learn from dukkha without feeling it, man? And he smiled. And then he told me, just start again in this moment. He said, just break it down one moment at a time. And then he said, notice your relationship to dukkha or your resistance to it. So a little inspired, not fully. I went for another like 45 minutes of, in my eyes, boring back and forth walking meditation. But as I was just taking it one step at a time, I realized that fighting dukkha, fighting feeling tired or fuzzy, that's actually the cause of unnecessary stress. That's the second noble truth. It's when your mind says, it should be different, or they should be different, or even more powerful, I or my body should feel or be different. That's the territory of dukkha that we can actually control a little bit. That's our relationship to dukkha. And so inspired by this idea of diagnosing or understanding dukkha from almost like a doctor's perspective, I went into the suttas, these old discourses, and I found a sutta called Dukkha Sutta, in which the Buddha says there's three kinds of dukkha. There's the dukkha caused by pain, caused by formations, and I'll explain, and dukkha due to change. So let's unpack these a little bit. And the first kind of dukkha, the one of pain, has a funny name in Pali. It's called dukkha dukkha. I love it, dukkha dukkha. And that's the physical pain of having a body. Remember, its birth is dukkha. Someone asked, is its aging really dukkha? Well, maybe check it out. Being subject to sickness is dukkha, to death. Dukkha dukkha, the first kind of it, is the most obvious aspect of this fact of life. And we can diagnose it within ourselves, but also around us. And the Buddha had a suggestion. He said, on a daily basis, remind yourself that your body is subject to aging, to sickness, and to death. Why? If we keep contemplating this, when you then all of a sudden wake up in the morning with a headache, experience shortness of breath, or here you have a chronic disease, that it won't come as a full surprise. Dukkha as a noble truth is this. Dukkha, dukkha. It's inevitable. And we also have to bear witness to the dukkha, dukkha of other bodies, the bodies of our loved ones, of our pets, even the dukkha, dukkha of plants we might take care of. Last week, I was talking to a friend who was sharing that his wife is having Alzheimer's. He said, it's hard for me to see my lifelong buddy lose her memory and also see her way more sad than she used to be. Dukkha, dukkha. Fact of life. Another thing I sometimes do on retreats is to go on a self-retreat. So not on a course, but just be by myself. And then too, I get some support from Joseph. Once he asked me, he goes, when you do your sitting meditation, don't set a timer, but just notice, why do you get up? And I just practice. He also said, see if you can sit as still as possible. Don't move. And I realized I had to get up because of dukkha, dukkha, the pain in the body. So I told him, and then he said, movement masks dukkha, dukkha. That's why we stretch. That's why we have to move. The more we diagnose dukkha also in our bodies, we start to see it's natural, just like impermanence. Every time I have to shave, I go dukkha, dukkha. I don't like shaving. Or feeding my body, what to cook again, clothing it, cleaning it. So this is a part of dukkha that's just part of life. Maybe notice if you can feel dukkha, dukkha right now. And notice the release that can come from maybe settling back a little, stretching a little, so that well-being is possible because there's ill-being. Now, the second kind of dukkha, I first have to also say it in Pali. It's called sankhara dukkha. And sankhara is a difficult word. It's also a key word in Buddhism because it has so many meanings. And it's mostly translated as fabrications, construction, creation. But I love to see it as this, that all things in the mental and material world are a sankhara because they're conditioned. Everything is co-created. A plant, a cloud, a human being, a watch, an emotion. Nothing in nature exists alone. And because all things are fabricated based on causes and conditions, and because they're also impermanent, they also are dukkha. The dukkha is in our lack of controlling them the way we want them. And that's that never fully satisfying aspect of dukkha. So what the Buddha saw is that dukkha is inherent in all sankharas. And that the well-being is about no longer suffering over that dukkha. Because that suffering over dukkha happens in our mind. And this is maybe the most important thing of the whole session today, is that the mind is the forerunner of all things. The Buddha said that so many times. All experience is created by mind, led by mind, made by mind. So our suffering over dukkha happens in our mind. Our well-being holding dukkha happens in our mind. And that's not to say that it's wrong that our minds create so much suffering. We all know the mental pain of sorrow, of grief, being desperate, or the dukkha of not getting what we want, the dukkha of being disrespected, stolen from, the dukkha of disappointment, of racism, or of losing your partner, your job, your community. But with mindfulness, we can also see that part of dukkha, become intimate with that part of dukkha as well, so that we don't fabricate even more dukkha. So the second kind of dukkha is huge. I don't fully grasp it yet. Because on the one hand, inherent in every aspect of life, there's something not fully satisfying. And we can hold it in different ways. Like today, yesterday, I was reading this article about the Prime Minister of Japan. And she said that on a regular day, work day, she only sleeps between 0 and 3 hours. That's the dukkha of culture and society. It's not something that we control. But don't forget, and this is where the well-being comes, the freedom comes. The mind is forerunner of all things. That well-being is possible, even in the midst of things being dukkha. But we need to know the recipe for more dukkha that we create. And that recipe is clinging to how things should be, or craving for things that aren't here yet. And there was one comment in the chat last week. I don't know if you're here, John, that we didn't have time to talk about. But John wrote that he talked about doubt that sometimes arises in his practice. And he said, it sounds like you're doing this wrong. You're practicing wrong. That's what he hears in his mind. He said, this is difficult to work with. And now when I was rereading that, I was thinking, if we put that in the framework of dukkha, then we can recognize doubt as dukkha. The Buddha actually called it a hindrance for seeing clearly. What would diagnosing dukkha be like then when you're feeling doubt? Maybe you could notice what it's like in the body. Maybe noticing the thoughts that feed doubt. And then check again. How was my mind relating to doubt? And there you find often that extra baggage of dukkha, of suffering. Maybe there's a judgment. I'm always getting it wrong. Maybe you want it to go away. In being mindful of seeing our relationship to experiences, we can see how ill-being, extra suffering is created. So see the next time, John, if you're here, when doubt arises, see if you can become intimate with it, willing to diagnose it, not letting your suffering go to waste. And often when we are aware of dukkha, it doesn't go away, but we might get more clarity. In the case of doubt of your practice, it could be that in that moment of clarity, you might want to reach out to someone to support you. So there's the dukkha of pain, dukkha, the dukkha of things being fabricated, sankhara dukkha. The last dukkha is called the dukkha of impermanence, or the dukkha of change. And in that same chat, John was also writing that it feels permanent to me, the doubt that arises in my meditation practice. I can so relate to that. I once told my teacher that for a whole day, I had been feeling miserable. And I remember what he told me. He said, not possible, not possible. And he says, look again. And he said, count how long your misery lasts and name your misery. Be specific. That's what he said. He was a very stern teacher. I love him. And so the assignment was, when I started practicing again with me feeling miserable, is to name and count how long the emotion lasts. So I started first with frustration. That turned into disappointment. But that didn't last long. That turned into anger. And that anger then turned into sadness. And then the sadness all of a sudden was gone, and I was obsessing about a Snickers candy bar. And just watching your mind in that way is wild. And I went back to my teacher and I said, I think the longest emotion that I could count was about 10 seconds. So in a way, knowing change can be liberating. But there's also the dukkha of change. The dukkha, when what John wrote, that things feel permanent. So that change is not happening fast enough. Or when it's unexpected. So just pausing for a moment. How have you been affected by change in a stressful way? When I was sitting with that question this week, I heard the words from Joseph coming to mind. He said, when I'm struggling in that way, I always ask myself in my meditation, what am I not accepting right now? What am I not accepting right now? Meditation is not about forcing yourself to accept, but just to know, what might I be clinging to? And I did that practice last week as I was I was supposed to go on a cycling trip with my son Lou. Once a year, he's 12, we cycle 50 kilometers. It's quite far to see my parents. But we had to cross a bridge in the beginning of our journey, and the bridge was completely taken over by a march of thousands and thousands of people. We couldn't even walk with our bikes next to it. So after like 2 kilometers, we had to turn back home. He was fine with it, but I was disappointed due to this unwanted change of my plans, my expectations. So I went and I dropped Joseph's question, what am I not accepting here? And it was me holding on to my expectation of what this day should look like. And I realized again and again that when we are really attached to things and experience, especially as mine, we suffer even more when they change in unwanted ways. So also, when you do recognize dukkha, perhaps drop that question. What am I not accepting right now? Just to get more information, to learn about dukkha. And then I noticed I was calming down a little bit and being okay with it. It wasn't the biggest thing in the world. And again, I remember that Joseph would often say, fighting impermanence is like fighting gravity. So there's the dukkha of pain, dukkha, the dukkha of all the fabrications in life, including our bodies, but also our minds and our cultures. And then there's the dukkha of impermanence. But because of permanence and change, everything is possible, also freedom. Because when we are aware, we can also see that even the clinging and the not accepting changes as well. Just want to close with some words from this Thai forest master, Ajahn Chah. If you let go a little, you'll have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you'll have complete peace. That realization, if you let go completely, you'll have complete peace, is the realization that dukkha has been diagnosed. When we start to see that the end of dukkha, the end of experiencing dukkha, is to not fight it, but to live with it and to see it again and again, how it unfolds in our lives. So I hope I have inspired you to keep diagnosing dukkha, that second fact of life, and to know you're not alone in this. We can do this in community. So I was thinking, I would love to hear from you in the chat if you want to share how you've been touched by dukkha, whether it's the dukkha of the pain in the body, the fabrications, or of change. Maybe also how you've been holding it, how your practice or wisdom or community has supported you in holding your dukkha. Thank you for your kind listening.
Bart, I'll start by reading what Julie had shared with us. She said, I'm realizing that because of my evangelical Christian upbringing, I think of dukkha like sin and associate it with me doing something wrong, leading to guilt, rather than just accepting it as here and as sometimes the nature of things.
Thank you, Julie. I can really relate to that. And I actually find it helpful to call dukkha, and this is really my interpretation. It might not be, but some scholars think that it's a fact of life. And when things are a fact of life or a law in nature, my attitude towards it has changed. And so sometimes, like this morning with the towel thing, I let myself be unhappy. I think that the practice is not about changing your unhappiness or immediately, bringing all kinds of tools towards it to transform it. Especially this teaching with these phases the Buddha said, maybe just start with allowing yourself to feel this natural dukkha. And so that even what might be called in some wisdom traditions as a sin is natural too. That there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe it's wrong in a sense of ethical, but that it arises, it happens. And so I think that as, when I started to use dukkha as a way to frame my experience, I'm just more willing to be with it as a natural occurrence. And so maybe see if it changes, Julie, when you see it from that perspective. But then also notice when your mind goes back into that old conditioning again. Oh, I should not be having these sinful thoughts, and just to notice that. Because in a lot of ways, Buddhism has a lot of, uh, is comparable to a lot of other wisdom traditions when it comes to our ethical behavior. But even when we make mistakes, that's natural too. I think that's what I've really learned from studying dukkha in this way. Thank you, Julie.
Erin had a wonderful question and reflection. She said,
Mhm.
from the link Jessica sent, I'm struck by the Buddha's limited view of aging. And what is aging? Whatever aging, decrepitude, brokenness, graying, wrinkling, decline of life force, weakening of the faculties of the various beings in this or that group of beings, that is called aging. He looks only at the dukkha of aging, failing to acknowledge the many very positive things about aging. How often do we do this? Considering only the negative side of things and creating dukkha for ourselves. Research shows us that this negative view has significant negative health impacts. How to sit with this teaching?
Oh, I so agree, Aaron. Last week, Bante was saying, imagine there would be a cream that you put on your face so that you look older. No one would buy it. So there is definitely this sankara in our mind, culturally too, to see aging as something that is not wanted, right? We all want to, I mean, not all, but a lot of people want to look younger. And I do think that you make a great point, Aaron, that it impacts us in a negative way. And I agree with you that the Buddha just highlights that more negative part of aging. But he had an agenda for it. And the agenda for it was to notice what it feels like to not cling to a body that doesn't look as youthful anymore. You know, when you do look in the mirror, that you might notice all the judgments, but maybe sometimes you might also look in the mirror and go, it's like this, that the judgments might be absent. And so, always in these teachings of the Buddha, he points to where are we clinging? Again, what am I not accepting in this moment? Like I have a broken molar right now. It was dukkha. And I kind of, also the doctor told me, the dentist said that that's part of being your age, Bart. It happens. At first, I didn't like hearing it, but then I would go, yeah, dukkha, dukkha, dukkha. I also find it helpful to have that language, dukkha, dukkha, you know? But I hear you, Aaron, and I agree. I think that it's also really helpful to celebrate our aging bodies, celebrating the fact that we get to live on this blue planet for already this long. I really thank you for your wisdom.
Janet asked us, how do you accept dukkha without feeling hopeless and giving up?
I think sometimes, Janet, you might not, and you might notice that you're not accepting. That is honest and real too. Especially when something recently has happened that was really not nice. Like I was quite upset by someone stealing my towel. And so there too, you can go maybe into in these phases, like at first just be with it and also notice I'm not accepting this right now. Can you allow yourself to not accept and really feel it with kind awareness? That's a bold thing to do. And maybe that's not enough. Maybe you need support from your community. But especially when over time, and something that comes up again that in the beginning you completely felt hopeless about, maybe notice if it's changed your attitude around it. That's why it's so helpful to sometimes use the meditation instruction where you notice, oh, hopelessness is absent. Or me, bringing back up an experience that was to some extent traumatizing where I go, less hurtful, less angry around it. So that you again see that also there too, it changes. I think that's what I would try to do, Janet, when you feel that way. Yeah.
Alan Marcia just shared most powerful teaching about relating differently by Joseph for me was Joseph's remark about acceptance. He said, it's okay if this fear is with me for the rest of my life. This relationship then becomes slowly transformed in a healthy way.
Yeah. One of the reasons why keep practicing is so helpful is that you keep seeing the same patterns over and over again. And then your attitude towards that particular pattern, let's say fear, it changes. So I really also think it's helpful, and that's what we can do. We'll do in-person gatherings more, but also after this in small groups, is to sometimes reflect to people about where do you feel less stuck around something? Where has something shifted in you holding something that will always keep returning in your life? We will never be excluded from fear, I believe. Thank you, Alan Marcia. I'm just reading Carson's. Carson, I'll share what you wrote. just as a reflection of how dukkha has manifested for you and Olga. About 6 weeks ago, my wife slipped and fell hard in Central Park, breaking her right shoulder and her left kneecap. I'm so sorry. After a number of medical visits, she had a shoulder replacement, and she's now about to begin physical therapy. For most of those 6 weeks, she was helpless. Prior to our fall, I was finishing writing a book on Buddhist philosophy, and we were planning our 4-week trip to Switzerland and Germany. The trip was canceled, and for the last 6 weeks, most of my writing has been put on hold, and I needed to learn to become a patient caregiver. Yeah. Please send my love to Olga Karsten and all that learning that can come from this too. Again, don't let your dukkha and suffering go to waste. Mm. I want to read this one too, Jessica, if you don't mind. I don't know whom it is. It says Samsung. Last night was difficult. After hearing about the attack in Berlin, I wanted revenge, to blame. And then I sat with it and understood that kindness and compassion and the agency that could bring would be a better way to go. Thank you for sharing that. And again, just allow yourself to pause. Allow yourself to feel revenge, to blame, to not suppress it. That's why I love when the Buddha done it, said, the noble truth of dukkha is like this right now.
I'm aware of the time, Bart. We have just a few more moments, so wonder if there's a final comment that you want to
There's so many, Jessica.
respond to.
Oh, this one from Anna. Oh, on doubt about meditation. I hope John hears this. On doubt about meditation. My teacher always repeated, every meditation is a good one. Never question your meditation. That helps me a lot. Mm, that's a good way to end. Thank you, Anna.
It sure is. So, friends, in just a moment, we'll be opening up our breakout rooms. They'll be open for 15 minutes. So, if you'd like to stay with us, we would love to have you. And next week, we'll be joined by Matthew Brensilver. He will be teaching us. And then Bart will be holding the space for our last session of the summer on August 9th. So, thanking you all so much for being with us. And dear Bart, if you have any other wise words to share with us, please do. And
Oh,
offer a dedication of merit, please,
I'm,
for our beautiful practice today.
I just want to start with just thanking you all and just acknowledging that we are all facing dukkha because we have a body. We all face this sankhara dukkha from time to time because we have this creating mind, this created body, these cultures, these communities. That we all suffer from time to time from the dukkha of change, impermanence. But to never forget that well-being in the midst of it all is possible. May we cherish those moments of well-being. And may we bring kindness, compassion, and mindfulness to moments when we cannot. May our time together support us and meeting all beings as they too experience dukkha. Because of dukkha, freedom is possible. May there be peace. May there be peace. May there be peace. Thank you.